Again, I don't want to draw a major difference between mentoring and coaching, but there is some difference there. But like I said, most of what I do, I consider coach mentoring. And the way that some people have said it to me is, well, if coaching is drawing something out of them, what happens if it's not in there to begin with? You know, and that's where the mentoring comes in, you know. So that is the case. And I just had a great conversation here with the ladies about just taking young women and having a cooking time together and cooking class or something like that that develops those relationships. But coaching is a particular skill that has particular organization to it that I have ran across, and I think in all of the world. ICF, International Coach Federation, is the number 1 accrediting organization for worldwide coaches. Australia, they're part of that as well, ICF, and that covers all coaches, whether they're business, leadership, executive, life coaching. There's all kinds of coaching that's being done today, and I don't want to get into all the details of that, but I do want to show you a video that will illustrate a little bit what we're talking about as far as coaching. And I'm going to set it up before I turn to the slide, because as soon as I turn to the slide, you will see a giant U.S. flag, United States flag, okay? So I'm not trying to be nationalistic. I'm not trying to compete or anything. But this is the video you're going to see is a short video of a basketball game, or the beginning of a basketball game. And we, as others, before any kind of sporting event starts, we sing our national anthem. And that's what you're going to see here. In case you're a basketball fan, U.S. basketball fan, Portland Trailblazers are one of the teams being represented here, and Morris Cheeks, I think, is the coach's name that you're going to see here. So I want you to pay attention to what's going on and see how you see principles of mentoring and coaching here. Okay? So I don't know that I can. Yeah, thank you, Laura.
And now, to honor America and salute the men and women serving our country with our national anthem, please welcome, as voted by you, the fans, our winner of the Toyota Get the Feeling of a Star promotion, Natalie Gilbert.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the stars like stars? Stars like glass gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. Oh, the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, and gave proof through the night
What'd you notice there? What was going on in that coaching relationship, mentoring, helping relationship?
It's okay, you can do it.
Yeah, it's okay, you can do it. It's the support. Did he take the mic away from her? No, I'm glad he didn't, because if you could hear his voice, he didn't have a very good voice. But he stood to her side, put his arm around her, gave her encouragement. You can do it, and gave her the words. What else did you notice?
The crowd caught on.
Yeah, the crowd got involved in it, weren't they? They were cheering them both on. Good. What else?
She didn't give up.
Yeah, she didn't give up. She said that when she stumbled and lost the words, and you saw her looking around, I think she looked this way and up. She was looking for her father, she said, and to try to find some moral support and some help, But he got there before she just bolted, and good for her that she just didn't run. So it speaks highly of her. Anything else you noticed? What? Yes, as she got on, you heard her get more confidence. So he gave her the confidence to sing out what she knew. So that's just a small illustration, I think, of how we can come alongside other people. And the rest of the story is that I think it was 2 weeks after this, she was invited to sing it at another sporting event and did it flawlessly. Can you imagine if she would have failed at that time, that she might never try that again? And so that's really what we're talking about when we talk about coaching. This is a definition that can be used for coaching. Coaching is an ongoing, so it's not just a one-time, like that illustration was. It's an ongoing conversation, and it's just a conversation. It's a back and forth conversation, but it's intentional. There's intentionality to it. And that's been a word that's come up several times, at least in my mind. That a lot of times we know how to do these things. We can see that they're good, but we're not intentional about it. So I'm going to ask you to think about what's one thing that you could do once you get home to apply some of these principles. What's one thing that you could do? It may just be a small step. It may just be a one conversation that you start with someone. But it's intentional, that empowers a person or group. There is team coaching that's done in the world today to fully live out God's calling. And each of those words are carefully chosen. It is empowering. It is encouraging. It is empowering them to go and do on their own. So coaching involves active listening. Several years ago in the United States, and I think it probably went around the world as well, that after corporations had invested in all of these management seminars, all of these leadership seminars, there was a period of time many years ago that the major seminar that corporations were sending their management and leadership to was simply a seminar on how to listen. They recognized that listening is so powerful and so important, but we don't do it very well. And listening is a skill that can be gained. So it's active listening, powerful questions, and we'll talk about that a little bit. A powerful question is an open-ended question. We ask questions all the time, but they're generally closed. They're can be answered with yes or no. Did you like that sermon? Yes. What did you learn from that sermon? What grabbed you from that sermon? What stood out to you? What one point that came to you? Well, that's an open-ended question because it invites them to share. So powerful questions that helps them to explore, helps them to think. Have you ever asked somebody a question and they've stopped and they kind of, it depends on how they think. They'll either look up or they'll look down, but they'll pause. That's a powerful question. You're getting them to think. Or they'll say, oh, that's a good question. I hadn't thought about that before. What are you doing? You're engaging their mind. You're helping them to think through, providing feedback. And what I mean by feedback is you're listening and then you're feeding back to them what you are hearing. See, I think one of the greatest gifts we can give to people is to listen to them. I think that is a great gift, to be able to listen and being intentional with them. Because some people think by talking. And as they hear that themselves, they're like, yeah, that doesn't sound right, does it? But feedback is another gift. Because you're saying, well, this is what I hear you say. And you put it back in your own words. So they're hearing it in their minds. They're hearing it as it comes out of their lips and it sounds different. And then you're interpreting by getting feedback. You're not adding to it. You're just saying, this is what I hear you say. Here's what I understand. Is that correct? Then you are giving them another gift to think through what they're thinking about 3 different times. And it helps them to process. So it's a great gift to give somebody. And then to empower them by designing action steps. What's one thing that you can do to begin to address that problem in lack of communication with your wife? What's one thing? One small step you can make. I'm going back to my experience with this men's ministry I work with is, and I'm sorry I don't have a good illustration other than a American football illustration, okay? I am culturally aware that football is the world sport and it's not the American kind. It is soccer football. There's probably other correlations, and you can ask me later or you can help me with that later on. But in American football, you're trying to get the ball across the goal, but you may just move it 1 yard, 1 foot at a time. And so when you're doing action steps or helping people say, what's one thing you can do, they don't need to go for and I'm sorry for the culturally insensitive illustration, they don't have to go for the touchdown every time. It's just moving a little bit closer and closer and closer. It's small incremental growth because you're also helping them build confidence. Integrity is built by making small promises and keeping them. Small promises and keeping them. Oh, I can do this. It gives them confidence. All right? And then you provide support for continual growth. After they talk through a problem and they say, I think this is what I need to do. And they go and do that. And you come back and say, how did that go? And the goal is not for them to say, oh, it went great. The goal is whatever happened, they say, I didn't get to it because of that. Okay, that's all right. Do you still think that's a valid action step? Then when can you do that? So we don't need to beat one another up, but just help them, empower them to keep moving forward. And if they said, no, I tried and it failed. Okay, let's think through that. What did you learn through that? What part of that went well? Why did it fail? And help them think through it so they can reshape that action step and say, instead of doing that, I think I need to do it this way. So again, you're just helping them. All right? Does that make sense? Does that? And again, you can do this informally. All right? And we do with MRN, we do coaching, a coaching workshop for Christian leaders. And some of you have seen this already. But we're going to talk a little bit about listening, okay, before we make a transition here. And this is just a real short, I think it's a German commercial.
Das hier ist mein Sektor. Das hier ist das wichtigste Gerät des Küstenwächters. Das Gerät und das Gerät. Überlebensgerät Redan.
Mayday, mayday. Hello, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Can you... Over. We are sinking. We are sinking.
Hello? This is the German Coast Guard.
We are sinking. We're sinking.
What are you thinking about?
So sometimes the listening doesn't go well. Let me see if I can, yes. So just give me a little bit of feedback. How do you know when someone isn't listening well? Eye contact. They're looking around, they're looking at their watch, they're looking behind you, they're not listening. So just giving people eye contact, paying attention to them. What are other ways that you, what are some ways that you know that people are listening? Eye contact, yes, sir.
Their response is way off.
Yeah. Well, they're just not listening because they're not giving you the proper feedback. The way that they're hearing is not what you're saying. Good. How does it generally make you feel when people don't listen well? Not valued. You're not worth listening to. I've got other things to do. Not valued. Frustrating, isn't it? Are there some husbands and wives talking to one another now? Yeah, it's frustrating because you're not listening, all right? And listening is a skill. It is simple skill. What do you appreciate? And you can see these on your, I'm not going to go over these, but you can see them, and they're pretty common, that you have them in the notes. What is powerful? Do you appreciate about somebody listening to you?
You feel respected.
Yeah. You feel respected. You feel valued. You feel heard. And when we say, I feel heard, that's more than just they heard me, the words I was saying. It's they valued me. They listened to me. So I think as a Christian leader, if you just work to listen more intently, that would make a ton of difference. A lot of difference in leadership. So you can look at those notes a little bit later on. And here's asking powerful questions. Is it open or closed? We've already talked about that. Is the question about me or is it about the coachee? Sometimes we just want to know all the details, but we don't have to know all the details. So am I asking just for my information and my curiosity, or is this a question that will help them? All right? Forward or backwards? Is this a forward-looking question, which coaching tends to focus on forward? Counseling or other things may focus on backward and then moving forward, but you want to move more with forward and not ask all the backward-moving questions with coaching. Is it building or is it correcting? Is it helping to build them or just to put them down and correct them? Not that you don't correct there. And the last thing that's on your notes, and I think shepherds could use this. This is a coaching model. So what I mean by coaching model is when I sit down with somebody that I'm coaching, I'm holding this process for them. They've got the content. I'm holding the process. And the process is moving forward. So I have in my mind, what is the goal that you want to accomplish in our conversation? What's the desired outcome? Okay? And then, okay, that's what you want to accomplish. What's the reality of this? What are the obstacles? What is the situation here? Who's involved in the situation? Have you been there before? What's different now? What is one step that you could take? Well, that comes down a little bit later on. But you're just getting the awareness of what's going on, of the reality. And you're helping them just explore it from a 360. You know, what does the Bible have to say about this? What does your values say about this? What does your spouse think about this? Has this happened to you before in the past? What's one thing that would move you further? So you're exploring. And then options. What options do you have? And that's where you get a little bit more into the action steps. Who could you consult with this? Who might be able to help you? Have you ever, maybe some information that you lack? What's one thing that you could do? What's one step that would move you closer? And all of these are in your notes. And then the will is, what will you do? What's one thing that you could do to address this? Very simple. And when I'm coaching, I don't say, okay, we're going to start with the goal. So what is your desired outcome? Now we're moving to the reality of the situation. But I think and there's other coaching models. In our 3-day training, we use another model that the coach model is a book that's recommended on your list there. And so that can be but this is just kind of a guide to help you move them forward. You're moving to some action steps. What do you need to do? Okay? All right. Any questions, comments about coaching here? We're going to shortchange some of the assignments that we were going to do. And it would be great for you to do the assignment that's there. Just get with someone. You might want to do this with your husband or wife and just say, okay, I want to give you 5 minutes. I'm only going to listen to you. So talk about what you want to talk about for 5 minutes. Tell me your story or a challenge that you're facing. And I'm going to listen and just ask clarifying questions. I'm going to give you feedback. I'm going to listen actively. But take some of those principles and begin to apply them. And we would love to get you some training in that. It's very simple. There's people in Australia that can do that as well. So it's not hard, but it's very, very empowering. Now, I'm going to ask Everett to come up, and can he grab that other mic? And I just this is the end of my time with you, and I really appreciate your patience and dumping all this information on you so quickly. But in Everett, I'll have about a 15-minute closing. But we want to kind of open it up to anything that we've presented that you might want to ask questions about. Anything that you want to add or give your perspective on. One thing I'm going to ask Everett is, Everett, don't want you to do it right now, but get ready for this. You're the one that gave me, hinted at the book, Overcoming the Dark Side of Leadership. I want you to talk a little bit about that in a minute and how you've used that with elderships. Okay. I didn't do a good job this morning we would love to learn from you. If you have some intentional ways that you are developing leaders, we'd love to learn from that. Because again, like I said, all of our partners are asking us for help and we're gathering material. But what we would really like to find are some places where you would like to join us in co-creating some leadership development processes and material for your environment, for your culture. So I'll just drop that. So talk to us a little bit about the dark side of leadership and how you use that with elders particularly.
Okay, if you want to pull that second session out, it's got the list of the shadows, as he was calling it, or the dark side. Let me say a few things as it relates specifically to elders and future elders. So, we're going to just take a few minutes to zero in because this is APEDS and elders part of it. But it's good for the spouses to understand this as well, to help your husband. In churches where you only have 2 or 3 elders, you've got some real challenges. I mean, if you have 2 elders, we know the challenge. You lose one, you lose your eldership. So that's always a dark shadow hanging over leadership in a church. And it does become a threat, especially where you do have a lot of small churches. Or even to get elders, many times to get started, the best you can find is 2. Now, 3 is I'd prefer 3 or more for obvious reasons. But here's the thing that's really important as it relates to the dark side. As you become an elder, certainly there are more expectations for you, but how you function together as elders is going to have a lot to do to set the tone for the whole church. It's like how my wife and I function together sets the tone for our family. And every one of our 3 kids always tried to come between us. You know what I mean, right? And I learned to always ask, what did mother say? Because I can tell by the way the question was crafted, I'm being set up. Ever have that? And I ask, and they look at me like, how'd you know I asked mother? I said, what did mother say? And every now and then it's go ask dad, but a lot of times, well, she didn't like it. I said, well, why? And so we get into this discussion. Okay, in a congregation, if you as an elder are not aware of your dark side, you're going to cause a problem. Everybody has a dark side.
Right.
Every single person has a dark side. And it's so important as an elder to be self-aware of what that is. You don't have to apologize for it, just work on it. Just work on it and know what it is. So I highly recommend it. I've used this book for, in fact, I used an earlier edition. I've used it for almost 30 years. Everybody that comes through my classes goes through this book. And the value of the book is it has a self-assessment tool within it. And you can actually map and see if it's not clear to you already what your dark side is, it will map it for you. And if you really want to double check it, have your spouse fill it out for you. Honestly. And to say, because so many times I think men are just not as perceptive of ourselves as women are. I think sometimes they're even typically more perceptive. But we're not, and it's really the blind side, not the dark side. And when you rise to leadership, here's how it's happened. I bet maybe you've seen it this way. I've known some men that I thought, they're going to make great elders. And once they're appointed as elders, like, who is this guy? It's Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. It's like, what happened here? Well, what happened there was a tipping point in that added responsibility, criticism that will always come, all of those kind of things, brought out the dark side that nobody had ever seen except their spouse.
Yeah.
All right? She knew about it. She's been living with it for years. But he wouldn't address it. And so it's very important to do this. Now, here's also why. It is virtually, I don't ever know how you win at this, for any member of the congregation to challenge an elder about his dark side. Especially if you're a preacher, or you're a young man, or whoever you are. Because that elder, because of the dark side, is going to get defensive. And you'll just never, and scriptures make it very clear, if you have an objection or issue with an elder, it's going to be with witnesses. So it gets us into some real problems, and your dark side can really hinder your credibility within the congregation. So look at that list, and maybe you already know it's narcissistic, paranoid, compulsive, whatever that is. Please be honest with yourself and recognize, number one, and it's one of my favorite statements out of Ephesians, but grace.
Amen.
But grace has been given to every one of us. But grace. So the grace is going to allow me the strength to address my dark side. So that the church doesn't have to be, I don't become a problem and awkward to the church. I mean, who wants to be the elephant in the room? Do any of you, any of you want to be the elephant in the room? They're talking and it's you. You're not hearing because you're not, no listening skills. When you've probably had all kinds of opportunities and you just didn't hear what people were saying or suggesting, and it was just flying right on by. So I really recommend this book. Go through it, map it, look at it, and then start processing it. You will do yourself a favor. You will also do your fellow elder a favor. Because basically the only one that can call you accountable is your fellow elder. In the kingdom of God, good followers make good leaders. So even though you're an elder, you're still a follower to your fellow elders. And when there's only one other, obviously this makes it even more awkward. But if the two of you can talk every now and then about something other than just the business of the church, and you're actually dealing with your own issues, you pray with each other, you hold each other accountable, that's going to be a healthy church. But if you do not even address your own dark sides, we got some problems. Which of those 5 do you think is the most common dark side in church leaders, among elders and preachers? Which one do you think is the most common problem in churches?
You've got one in your mind.
Narcissistic? Okay, anyone think another one?
David said 2, narcissistic.
Well, we don't have a lot of time.
We
Actually,
do. Go ahead.
the studies, well, yes. The thing is, that those first ones, like narcissistic, those are more obvious. You can see it there. It's hard to hide that one. The one that's the most common, because you can slip it under the door and it's always there, is codependency. Codependency is the most common one, and it shows up when all the women in the church tell that one of the elders, why don't you do something about this? And he has waited and waited and waited. It's like we need a man to stand up with courage and say, boom, that's enough. Okay, do you see that? Because there's a codependency developed that his identity is so much tied to the church. There's this very unhealthy codependency, and we need some self-differentiation. So that's one. Now, the ones that are the most obvious would be compulsive and narcissism. It's all about them. The one that's the most deadly is a very doctrinally conservative person who's paranoid. That'll kill a church. Because anyone different is viewed not as they can talk like it's a threat to their doctrine, but in essence it's a threat to them because they have not distinguished between their opinion and their doctrine. You know what I mean? So many a split is a result, some say, of personality. It's just a result of unhealthy leaders. You do not want to be a stumbling block in the kingdom of God. And I just say, as a leader, as an elder, I believe you honestly have the responsibility to God. You're accountable to God for how you kind of function within the church.
So define, I've attempted, but you add to this knowledge. How would you define a dark side or the shadow, as I use the phrase? What is define that for us? Help us understand it.
One is the source of it.
Yeah.
Most will tell you that the source of your dark side formed during puberty or early lifehood crises. And it can stay latent until you have a problem, and then kaboom, it comes out. Now, some cultures don't have midlife crisis like we do in the West, but it comes up. It somehow, by the time you hit 40s, with added responsibility, added disappointments, added challenges, it starts
Losses.
to just... Yes, and losses and defeats and unfulfilled dreams, whatever it is. It starts welling up, and it's now become a battle between the flesh and the spirit. It is the flesh. It is the flesh. It's our fallenness. And every person has it. And it's just best if we discover it and somebody doesn't have to convince us of it. All right? Anything else you want to say about that?
I just want to, I want your questions, okay, in a minute. But I do want to draw your attention to that first handout. I have recommended resources on the back for your eldership. As Everett has already said, that it's the third one from the top by Gary McIntosh and Samuel Rima, Overcoming the Dark Side of Leadership. There is an assessment in there. You have the descriptions that I gave you on the notes. But there's an assessment that you can take, and your wife, that is a good resource. See, there's a good reason why we're called Missions Resource Network. We don't pretend to know it all, but we can create environments for you to discover and to grow. And another book I want to recommend to you is the one I drew from. It's down at the bottom, Peter Scazzaro, The Emotionally Healthy Leader. It also has assessments in there that if you're looking at how you dealt with your family, whether you're prioritizing ministry over a family, it'll have some assessments in there. And he actually has some good follow-up material online where your whole eldership could work through things with the material that he provides online.
Right. And this now becomes a source of mentoring. Jay is really good as a coach mentor. I'm more of a mentor coach because of my clientele. For the last 30 years, I've been coaching graduate students who are new into ministry. So I tend to be a little more proactive in it. But we always say a degree from HST comes with a lifetime warranty. So I've had students call me 20 and 25 years out. And I get calls when they're at the crisis point or a major junction or when should I leave this church or I've got to, it's that kind of thing where it's not so much long-term thing as it is occasional mentoring / coaching. What I do with students tends to be mentoring. What I'm doing with church leaders tends to be more coaching, consulting, and that may help a little bit. One thing I do recommend if you get the book is just photocopy the questions on it so you can reuse it, so you don't use it in the book and say that's a way to keep using that tool, but it'll help you graph it, and it's very painfully enlightening, but it's humbling. And I think the foundation to good leadership is humility. And if you need a little help in that area, this will be glad to give it to you. Can I mention one other thing about mentoring? And this is something that Pauline and Benny, and they found it in Melbourne, is there's material available by Ed Gray called 12 Conversations. And it's 12 conversations for mentoring couples, 12 conversations for, a whole gamut of them. And I just heard Monday night some great example of how that's being used and the good that's done. And it gives sort of direction. Because sometimes we just don't know the questions to ask.
Right.
And this just asks questions and you're able to share in conversation and really actually walk alongside to where those who are experienced can share their experiences. And it really brings out in a very non-threatening way, some incredibly rich tools. The other thing is if you're a deacon or a prospective elder, this is important material to prepare yourself to be an elder, to prepare yourself to be a leader. You don't have to wait till then to start addressing it. Yeah. You'll be a better husband in the process.
I want to say something about the 12 conversations. It is, I think, 12conversations.com, and I should have put it on my list. But before I take the time to talk about that, you have questions for Everett or for both of us, any kind of questions or comments, any kind of exploration. Yes?
Why not we change the names of the elders and deacons as the chief servant and junior servant? The preacher should be the chief servant, and the elders should be the servants, and the deacons to be the junior servants.
Junior servants?
Yes, then we can avoid all the problems. About the brothers, what he stated about the back shadow, how we can find, I want to answer that. When I stand like that, like this, all the people will see only my back. When I stand like this, all the people will see only my front appearance. So, when I turn like this, the people cannot find what the shade of me behind. So, everybody find out the black shadows. Nothing be their fault. For that, Jesus stated, and he says, you must be the servants.
Right.
Whenever we keep the elderships and deaconships in the church, it will be something hurdle and it's an obstacle to grow in mutual edification. It's my feeling and it's my desire. Please pray for that.
Amen. Thank you. I love what you've done as far as they've made the preacher the chief servant as far as his title, and the elders are the servants, the deacons are the junior servants. And I love the illustration about the positioning. You know, when we're always facing here, you can't see, but sometimes when you're following me, you can see some of those. And so our being able to show the full self, I think, is important.
And I like I've always been annoyed by the stepping down from being an elder.
Yeah.
This, when you quit being an elder, you step up. I like that.
Yeah. Questions, comments?
Maybe just another sort of acronym that we tend to use, particularly when we do peer coaching or get people involved in the peer coaching process, is we, again. And instead of saying, you know, what went well and what crashed and burned, we tend to say what went well and even better if.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Even better if,
Yeah.
which is the E. And it's amazing how people are much more comfortable talking about what they could have done better than what crashed and burned.
Right.
You get the same information.
Same information.
It's just a different way of
And
phrasing
it opens their mind up. Even if, what would have happened if?
Yeah, and
Even better if.
Yeah, there's
Excellent.
a whole,
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a whole research field called appreciative inquiry that brings a lot of that out too.
Yeah.
You ask the positive questions.
Okay, over here, Mark.
Thanks a lot. A lot of churches in Australia are quite small, probably everywhere, I suppose, as well, India as well, and they don't yet have an eldership or a deaconship. I'm just wondering if you have some advice or recommendations about how those churches can be working to build up people into those roles in the meantime, while they can't yet form, you know, either of those groups, or maybe just not, you know, they might not be able to form an eldership, maybe they can do a deaconship. Is that a good way to start off? I don't know, your thoughts.
I think as far as, again, I go back to the word of intentionality. You know, I think to prepare people, you have to have some intentionality to say, you know, we don't have elders, we don't have deacons, but we have these men, and we want to invite them into some intentional training, an intentional study, an intentional walk. And so I think that is a good approach. I think just that you've got to take some steps. And what if your church is not doing anything, and you feel this call, you don't want to be presumptive to say, I want to be an elder, but you want to be a servant leader. And so you can find ways, find people, get in contact with some people here that you know, get in contact with us. We can give you some options of how you can purposely begin to develop yourself as a servant leader. And I think serve where you're at using the skills that you have now. We've got skills. We've got opportunities. We don't have to wait for the title. We need to use it now that we're doing. And what else would you say about that?
I guess practically look at it both at the individual and the group level. At the individual level, continue to mentor, coach, to where they act at least what would an elder do? I mean, someone that you know has got that ability to say, well, if you were an elder, how would you respond to this? And right now we need somebody to step up and do that. I think at the congregational level, step by step, keep explaining the difference. If we'd had elders, here's how this would have been handled. But because we don't have elders, we have no shock absorbers in this church. So that's part of it. The other thing is, at least in our context, it is extremely difficult if you have no elders to do it without outside help. And I think that's what Titus was going to do. He was an outside resource to facilitate the process. I do not think anybody from outside the congregation should come in and say, here's who should be elders, including missionaries. I don't think they should do that either. But they should facilitate the process. So there's some fairness to it and health to it, not someone just doing their own thing or appointing themselves, but it clearly is the congregation surfacing people that they respect who are spiritual leaders within that congregation. So maybe those are a couple of things. I heard the bell ring.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bing.
Okay, anything else? All right. Thank you, Everett. I appreciate it. It has been good to be with you, and we'll continue to enjoy the feast together. Thank you for your patience. We want to be a resource to you. We want to co-create with you. We want to learn from you. And thank you for allowing us to be here. You'll hear from Sam a little bit later on. But both Everett and I, and we have access to others. We want you to feel that we are with you. And we want to learn from you and see God continue to grow His kingdom here in Australia. I spent some time in Perth before I came here, and I had some amazing spiritual conversations just with people in the world. And I think there's great opportunities for what God's doing as we have spiritual conversations with people. Let me pray for you, and we'll take a break. Father, we just thank you for relationships. We thank you that you are a relational God, that you loved us so much that you sent your one and only Son. Jesus came in the flesh, and He pitched His tent among us to live with us, to have relationship with us, to model and to be an example of what you intended to be from the very beginning as we live as your children and as we are made in your image. Father, thank you for your forgiveness and for the blood of your Son that redeems us and buys us back into that relationship with you. And I'm grateful that you're transforming us from in an ever increasing way of we want to be more like Jesus today than we were yesterday. We want to be transformed until you come and bring us into your eternal service, Father. Thank you for these good people and the blessing it is for me to be here and to receive from them. It's in Christ we pray. Amen.